Welcome back to the Double Leg. I'm one half of the show, Hey Jai Picks. The other half of the show, the Parlay, joining me in to break down some UFC Saudi Arabia. Main event has changed. It is no longer Khamzat Chimaev. It is the man that Khamzat Chimaev defeated. It is Ikram Aliskerov, the unranked Ikram Aliskerov taking on Robert Whittaker. So we still get to see Whittaker in the main event. Co-main event, absolute banger. Sergey Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov. This card is going downhill pretty quick. We're losing a lot of fights. We got 11 lined up right now. One of them isn't really a UFC fight either. It's a road to the UFC title fight. So we got 10 UFC level fights. So we're really scraping by. UFC or Saudi Arabia is probably a little bit pissed because this card has kind of gone downhill pretty quick. We lost Cedriques Dumas, Dennis Tululin, literally like 3 hours ago. Muhammad Naimov's opponent, Melsik Bagdasaryan, pulled out. They did get him a replacement opponent, which we'll break down that fight as well. But yeah, card looks pretty dang good. But before we get into that, let's recap UFC Vegas 93. Absolutely awful night for me. One of the worst in recent memory. Minus 8.44 units. Just could not hit shit, man. I just couldn't hit a bet. Garrett Armfield screwed me big time. I had a big bet on him. That was the biggest loser. And then just picking up losers across the board. The only highlight of the night, well, I had two highlights, I guess. The Weston Wilson sub, a round one sub at plus 900, which, was a little sprinkled, but it hit. And then if you follow my DFS plays, crush it on the DFS. We hit the 5-legger for $100 to win 2,000. And then we swept the board on underdog and went 2-2 on better picks for profit. So straight bets were absolutely terrible, but DFS was off the charts. How'd it go for you?
Well, first, if I get into mine, dude, you've been fucking killing the DFS plays. Dude, it's insane. It's like every single week.
Best out there.
I was gonna say, and even going back to like when you and I started the double leg, like nobody's really putting out UFC props. And back then, I remember you had like an 85% hit rate, like through the first like 6 months that we did this thing. And
it's great because you don't rely on the judges' decisions, man. Like at the end of the fight, if you think the fight's going to go the distance and it's between two women, you take the over on significant strikes. That's the end of the bet. You don't care who gets the decision or not. So it's like, I think there's a lot of upside to it. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't work out, but we have been really hot. So if you don't tail those yet, or start tailing those, and hopefully we continue. But go on.
Yeah, no, I ended up 1.3 units, and I got to thank Melt Costa for it because he hits the fight ends inside the distance for a couple of units. I hit the sub on him at plus 450 for a couple of units. And then, I was on the wrong side of the Carly Judici fight. I had a larger bet on her. I just thought the volume was going to take over, and it did. She just, didn't have the power that Fernandez did. We lose that close fight. We win Adam Fugit, which I thought was a pretty sharp play because he was plus money. Everybody was on Quinlan. And he scraped by and got that close decision win. Douglas Silva de Andrade was my biggest money line bet because everybody was on Miles Johns. I thought he was going to have way more volume than Johns. And he just came out flat-footed, didn't look like he wanted to fight, looked very old. So terrible bet on my part. But ultimately, we squeaked by with profit, hit Brady Heathstand spread plus 3.5. That was looking really good in the first round. Then it was looking really, really bad in the second round. And then it was back to looking good again in the third. So, that kind of recaps my night. Frustrating night, even though we ended slightly up. Kind of some annoying fights to watch. I don't know, man. The UFC's been weird the last few weeks. I just get weird feelings off these cards. It's been very strange.
Ever since the new gloves, man, we just can't get any finishes. It's like watching paint dry sometimes out there when, two guys are just staring at each other, throwing one punch at a time, resetting, and all these fights are going to a decision. So, hopefully we get some finishes on this card because the UFC Saudis want some finishes. They want some exciting fights, and these gloves might be the problem. But
we've had 5 KO or I guess TKOs since the new gloves. And we had an elbow from Bruno Ferreira. We had a knee from Carlos Prates.
There's really only two. There's only two real fist knockouts, and that's Dominic Reyes and Zachary Reese out of 3 cards. So
I looked at the 3 cards before the new gloves, and there was 12. So yeah, it's definitely down. The violence is down, and the submissions are up.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know if
gonna
you caught Brady Heastand's interview, but he was saying that
you can say that.
it's
Yeah,
easier to grapple, and like you could control, like it's easier to squeeze your own wrist and get that clinch going. So yeah,
they look a little bit
interesting
thinner.
stuff.
Like if you look side by side, the
Hmm.
gloves look like a little bit thinner. They're not as bulky, so maybe that helps like getting the chokes in and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, but co-main event, we're definitely going to be testing that theory with Sergey Pavlovich and Alexander Volkov. We're going to go through, give you a breakdown and a prediction and a pick for every single one of these fights. And those are the picks. But if you want all the bets, jump in the Homo Fight Picks Premium membership. Link is down in the description. Let's start it off with the first fight of the night. As I alluded to, the road to the UFC title bout in the bantamweight division. We got Xiao versus Chang Ho Lee. Now these guys both have 2 wins in the tournament, so it's a 3-round tournament. They've been booked to fight before multiple times, all the way back to December of last year. Then they got booked in February, and now they are fighting on a UFC card. And man, I don't see anyone that has like a strong lean on this one. And I watched both fighters, and I don't really have a strong lean either. Like these guys are pretty similar to me. The only real difference that I see is Chang Ho Lee's been finishing his fights on the road to the UFC, and Long Zhao hasn't. But at the end of the day, like, does that really mean anything? Because I think both guys are pretty durable. Both guys kind of fight similar. They want to slug it out on the feet, and then they'll mix in some takedowns here and there. But what do you got on this one?
So for Zhao Li or Zhao Long, tell me who you think he looks like when you watch him strike on the feet. I don't know if it's gonna click to you, but Habib Nurmagomedov, like he's
Really?
got this like bouncy, like almost like spastic style of striking. Like he's not technical, and he's like got this pressure that would just like wear his opponents down from like his movements and his aggressiveness, but he doesn't like have like the technical striking whatsoever. Like next time or when you see him fight Saturday, just keep in mind that he looks exactly how like Habib strikes. And it's like not the most effective, but like when he fought Christian Quinones on the Contender Series, he had some decent moments. He landed some big shots. You can definitely tell he's got power in the hands. But I think his game's going to be more of using that kind of striking to get his opponent up against the cage, mix in some takedown attempts and ultimately just wear his opponents down. But on the other side here with Lee, like he doesn't really seem to slow down, at least in the fights that he's had in the last couple of years. And like you said, he gets a lot of finishes, definitely the more violent of the two. I think he's got way more technical striking in this matchup. And if this thing plays out on the feet, I think I have to lean with Lee. He's got good pop in his hands, but he's definitely a more composed and he's got more of a process with the striking compared to Long, who's just out there, going haywire. And that style can throw opponents off though. So I
Yeah.
think this one comes down to who can kind of control their opponent more, who's going to have the better wrestling in this matchup. And I think offensively, I think I think Long is probably going to win that battle, but Lee has shown. I saw him in Brave FC get taken down. He's able to work back up to his feet and start hurting his opponents in the clinch. So he's good there too. I think this is like one of the most evenly matched fights on the whole entire card. It's going to be impossible to pick a winner to me. For the pick, I'm going to go with Zhao Long just because I really like that pressure he puts on his opponents. And if there's any advantage either of these guys had, maybe it's his cardio, maybe it's that pace, maybe it comes in handy. So this is a tough one though.
Yeah. I think it is important to note that Chang Ho Lee fought at flyweight before, so he might be a little bit smaller. That's where his only loss does come when he fought at flyweight. But since then, he's just been fighting at bantamweight. Seems to have filled out a little bit. There's not like a big size discrepancy here, 5'8" and 1 inch reach advantage for Zhao Long. In both guys, for both of their fights on the road to UFC, it seemed like they were fighting grapplers. Like both of their opponents were trying to take them down the entire fight, and they were just struggling to get back to their feet. And when they did, they landed some good shots and won their fights that way. So I don't know if either guy's going to implement wrestling in this one. If anybody, it's probably Zhao Long. And Chang Ho Lee, he's got really solid cardio. Like the way that I watched his fights, he was able to battle back from getting taken down, especially in his last fight. He got taken down a bunch, and then eventually finished the guy and just kind of outworked him in round 3. So I'm going to side with Chang Ho Lee here just because I think he's a little bit more dangerous on the feet. But, probably one you don't want to be throwing a bunch of coin on because I hate betting on road to the UFC. I've tried it before, and it's just so unpredictable. You can't really get a read on any of these guys. You don't know what they're going to do. So probably one I'll pass on, but I'll take Chang Ho Lee for a pick.
Yeah, like Jekka Sergey is the type of guys that are coming off the show,
Literally, yeah.
and
Schultz-Ruble was the champ.
Yes,
Like,
exactly. And before anybody in the comments chews me out here, I wasn't saying this kid is as good as Habib by any means, or I wasn't trying to compare him. I was just saying, his style of striking is weird, like Habib.
Yeah, we got the next Habib here in long.
Yeah, he's gonna get beat just because I said that.
All right, we'll move on to some UFC fights, but these guys are both more Dana White Contender Series level at this point. Magomed Gadzhiyasulov sitting at minus 400, taking on Brendan Ribeiro plus 285. Ribeiro loses his debut, but he had a big knockout on the Contender Series to get his UFC contract. And, he's one of these guys where he's kind of kill or be killed. He's been finished a bunch. He's got a bunch of finishes on his record. He's a guy that wants to stay at range, use that long reach, 81-inch reach. He's kind of got a weird build. Like, he doesn't really look like a 205er if you look at, his frame from the waist up, but he's got those long arms, he's got long legs, and he's got some power. So if he can keep the range against Gadzhiyasulov, he's got a chance to knock him out. But at the same time, like, Gadzhiyasulov never lost. He's got a good all-around game, and he's a favorite for a reason. What do you got on this one?
Yeah, I think his style, if he can get the wrestling going, he's very strong. He gets good takedowns. He's very good with his control. And I think that's the type of style that is going to give Ribeiro some problems. I mean, we saw in Ribeiro's last fight, he's tried to stand and bang with Zhang, and he gets knocked out. And that's going to happen at that weight class. Both those guys throw hard. I think Ribeiro had a good chance to knock him out as well if that fight progressed. Like, that was kind of a coin flip on which guy is going to land the big shots first. I just don't know if Gadji is going to really give him that opportunity. I think he's going to come across the cage, grab a hold of him, put him up against it, use his strength, and try to wear down Ribeiro. Because I don't think Ribeiro is a guy that's going to come out here with insane cardio. I think he's a guy who burns hot, wants to get right into the fight right away. And when that doesn't work out, opponents that have good wrestling games and good grappling, like Magomed here, I think he's going to have a lot of success with that. Minus 400 on a debut, though, is sketchy. And like I said, Ribeiro is a guy who does have power standing across from him. So if he does stuff the takedowns, or Gadji wants to come out here and just make this a striking match to show off his hands a little bit, he's going to be in danger for sure. I just don't like betting against them over here in Saudi Arabia, especially with, the wrestling is going to be the big difference here. And if he gets that going, he'll definitely look like the minus 400. So he's going to be the pick. Definitely not placing a bet on his money line. But yeah, I think he gets this thing done.
Yeah, man. I mean, Gadzhiyasulov fought the great Jose Medina on the Dana White Contender Series.
Mm-hmm.
So big win there. Pretty much dominated him, 30-27 across the board. And if you look at Gadzhiyazulov's record, like, he's crushing cans, really.
Yeah.
Trains out of the Kingdom of Bahrain, but he is born in Makhachkala, Dagestan. So he's a true Dagestani when he was brought into this world. But since then, trains out of the Kingdom of Bahrain, which is the kingdom that Shamil Gaziev is from as well. So that is a little bit concerning for the Gadzhiyasulov side. But yeah, I think he's probably the better overall fighter. I just don't know that he's as dangerous as Brendan Ribeiro. So I can't really, lay minus 400 with a lot of confidence. But at the same time, I think if he fights smart, he should win this fight, get some takedowns, stay safe on the feet. And he should probably pick up a W. So Magomed will be the pick. Moving on, we got Muin Gafurov sitting at minus 140, taking on Kyung-Ho Kang, sitting at plus 110. Kang, 36 years of age, coming off a loss to John Castaneda. Gafurov 0-2 in the UFC, looking to get his first win. He is the favorite here. What do you think?
Yeah, for Kang, if I didn't just see him lose the Castaneda like that, a fight where he just didn't look that good. I mean, he landed a lot of significant strikes, but nothing really meaningful. He was taken down 3 times. If I didn't see that, I'd be willing to take him here as a slight underdog, but I just don't think the plus money is big enough to take a shot on him here against a guy in Gafurov who is kind of like, yeah, he hasn't won in the UFC or at this level, but he's kind of just like this bull who rushes forward. He's going to throw some massive shots. He's going to mix in the wrestling, and he'll do so successfully. Like we saw him take down, was it on the Contender Series? Yeah, Chad Anheliger 5 times, loses a split decision, comes in, gets beat by Castaneda in a fight where he was like having a lot of success early. He just kind of gassed himself out trying to find the finish. And then the headbutt, where, like I said, he's like a bull. He comes straight forward, headbutts Castaneda straight ahead. Ref takes a point, and then he really empties the tank, kind of thinking, he's kind of got to get the finish or he's going to lose on the cards. Ends up losing the fight, goes in against Said Nurmagomedov, gets submitted in the first round very quickly with that nasty front choke. But against Kang, this is kind of an opportunity to get his first win, in my opinion. I think Kang is a guy who wants a more technical fight. Gafurov's not going to give it to him. Kang's a guy who looked a step slower against Castaneda, if I'm being honest. I had a bet on Kang at plus money there, and he just was never really in control of the fight, never really gave himself a chance to win. I think the only chance, not only chance, but the path to victory for Kang is to try to catch him Gafurov in some kind of submission when Gafurov's shooting these crazy takedowns and stuff. Other than that, on the feet, I think it's going to be Gafurov landing the bigger shots. He's there to be hit. I just don't think Kang really has the power to really hurt him or phase him. I don't know if Kang has a single, he doesn't have a single KO, TKO on his UFC record or anything. It's all decisions and submissions. He's tough, though. I mean, he doesn't really get finished, but I just think that Gafurov is going to look better to the judges. Gafurov doesn't seem to have that long of a travel compared to Kang here over to Saudi Arabia. I don't know. This is another tough one where I just don't like it that much, but I'm going to take the younger fighter. I'm going to take the more aggressive fighter and the guy that really needs the UFC win. He's probably on the chopping block.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know that I could justify, bet on Gafurov as a favorite, but at the same time, I don't really think Kang has much to win this fight other than maybe finding some type of submission. I mean, he could outpoint him on the feet because he's the cleaner striker, but I don't think Gafurov's going to be able to, or going to lull into like some type of kickboxing fight. Gafurov's got a lot of pressure. He'll shoot the takedowns and he'll usually get them. And, his last time getting subbed by Said and Magomedov. If you shoot a takedown on Said, you're probably going to get subbed. Like the guy's super good at those front chokes. So I think we were both on that one. That was one that we were.
Those are free play of the week.
Locked in. It was like what, plus 250 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were dead set on it. I wish I would have put more on it looking back, but yeah, I think Gafurov wins this one, but it's probably going to come down to a decision, and it's probably 29-28 either way. And maybe they give it to Gafurov because he's got that OV last name in Saudi Arabia, but I don't know, like laying the chalk, am I really that confident in it? So maybe I just look for like the over 2.5 or something, parlay that or something. But yeah, Gafurov would be the pick. Not one I'm really looking to bet on heavy. Yeah. Moving on, we got Rinat Fakhretdinov sitting at minus 340 against Nicholas Dalby sitting at plus 250. Nicholas Dalby on quite the run at 39 years of age, 4-fight win streak, and he just knocked off the hype train of Gabriel Bonfim, which was pretty damn impressive. Rinat Fakhretdinov himself is very impressive because he is on quite the winning streak, or at least the no-loss streak. He's won 9 in a row, or more than 9 in a row. He's won a lot in a row. But he's coming off the draw to Alejo Zaleski dos Santos, where he won the first 2 rounds and then got 10-8'd in the third, nearly finished. So we could see a little bit of a similar type of game here against Nicholas Dalby, a guy that usually wants to take guys into deep waters and try to take over as the fight goes on, just like he did against Gabriel Bonfim. So Rinat is the big favorite. Are you taking him?
I think he does win this fight by a very, very close margin. I see a lot of people talking about Fakhretdinov's gas tank after the Zaleski dos Santos performance. I don't know if it's like a bad gas tank. I just think Zaleski is a super tough matchup for anybody. I mean, we just saw against Randy Brown. He was in a position to finish Randy Brown towards the end of the fight at one point. Had a lot of success even against a guy like that and made that a super tough fight for Randy Brown when Randy Brown was a big favorite. He's just the guy that's always going to find a way to make it close down the stretch, which is like Dalby's similar to that. But I just think Zaleski's way more dangerous than a guy like Dalby. I don't know if Dalby has the, the power and the, the grappling and wrestling to really wear down Fakhretdinov like Zaleski dos Santos did. I think the rounds could be close just based off the fact that Dalby's just a workhorse and maybe it's going to be harder to take him down. And if Fakhretdinov can't, maybe it plays out on the feet and it's going to be who has the better volume. But I just don't like the narrative that Hanat has a bad gas tank. I think this is going to be a fun fight. I do think Fakhretdinov is going to have the ability to win the first few, and yeah, maybe he drops the third. But even though Dalby is coming off of the big win over Gabriel Bonfim by KO, I mean that was like his first KO almost ever in the UFC. Yeah, I think his only other fight that's involved a finish was against Jesse Ronson, which ended by submission. Everything else, win or loss, has been decision. So yeah. I just think Bonfim did gas out and didn't really have that experience on how to survive a big pressure fighter like Dalby. I think Fakhretdinov going, 3 rounds with Zaleski dos Santos and getting 10-8 in the third round is going to be a big learning fight for him. He didn't take the loss, but still a fight that, you get better from and take a lot away from. And Fakhretdinov's got some big power on the feet too, so it wouldn't be surprised if he hurts Dalby. I don't know if he finishes him, but the one way to slow down a big pressure guy like that is to start stinging him with shots on the feet. So, yeah, I'm going to take Fakhretdinov to win. Not going to be surprised if Dalby makes this very close or even steals it. But I do think Fakhretdinov probably going to look a little sharper in this one than he did against Zaleski dos Santos.
Yeah, I like Dalby because I think he's got a really tough style of fighting to deal with. But so does Renat. But the thing with Renat's cardio is I don't think he's like, a guy that's going to death gas to the point where he can't fight anymore. It's just that when he gets tired and when he's not in the driver's seat, like as we saw in that third round with Zaleski, his striking is just, to start off, his striking is not technical at all. It's just big power shots, big overhand rights. And then once he gets tired, those overhand rights get a lot slower and everything gets a lot sloppier. And that's where guys can, take advantage of that. With Dalby, he's not like a big power puncher. He's just a guy that's a big dude with good cardio who's never been finished. He has been hurt. He's been knocked down actually like 4 times in his UFC career. So he can get hurt, but he's never been finished. So he's going to be there. He's got decent takedown defense. He's got a good get-up game. And he's a guy that's just going to keep the pressure on from the jump. And I think that's a pretty good style to beat Renat Fakhretdinov. Because honestly, I know Renat is sitting here with a 22-2-1 record. Like he's only lost twice in his professional career. But, he's been in the UFC for 4 fights now? Before the UFC, he wasn't beating anybody. He was just beating straight up cans. And even in the UFC.
I say Kevin Lee is.
You have to look at his wins in the UFC. Like Andre Michailidis was cut. Brian Battle took that fight on like 7 days' notice. He beat him by decision, absolutely dominated him, but he took the fight on 7 days' notice. Kevin Lee, we know where Kevin Lee was at that point in his career. And then a draw to Zaleski. Well, Nicholas Dalby beat Zaleski. So if you're playing MMA math, then that looks a little bit different. Now, Nicholas Dalby, you look at his resume, it's actually pretty damn good. Like, he's 23-4-1. Since he got cut from the UFC the first time, his only loss is Tim Means. He's 6-1 since in his second stint in the UFC. And he's went to a draw with Darren Till when Darren Till was in his prime on his title run. Beat Zaleski a long time ago. Beating Daniel Rodriguez. Beat Muslim Salikov. Beat Gabriel Bonfim last time out. So I don't really think there's any way that I can look at this and say Renat should be minus 340. Because like you said, like this fight probably goes to a decision. And yeah, Renat could probably win the first 2 rounds, but that third round might get a little bit dicey. So minus 340, does that really make sense? Not really to me. So then I look at the dog and I'm saying, okay, plus 250 on Nicholas Dalby to win 2 out of 3 rounds or take over late and find a finish late. I think that makes a lot more sense. So by default, I think Nicholas Dalby is definitely the side if you're going to bet on this. Even if Renat wins a 29-28 decision, I don't think minus 340 is a real good bet there. But, Dalby has been hurt. He's a little bit older, but it seems like he's in the best shape of his life. So I'm going to take Nicholas Dalby for a pick, and definitely something I'll be eyeing up to bet throughout the week. Just want to see where this line goes. If it rises with Fakhretdinov, we get an even better number on Dalby. I just think he's super live because he's durable. He's got great cardio. He's got a good overall skill set, and he just comes with an insane pace. And that's something that Fakhretdinov kind of struggles with. So that's my breakdown. Hopefully Dalby's got one left in him, you know?
Yeah, I mean, beating Gabriel Bonfim is a massive dog, and then you're going to get plus 250 on a guy who has a wrestling style that could get tired like he did in his last fight. I mean, I think plus 250 on Dalby is kind of an auto bet at this point. Like whether you think you have a ton of confidence in it or not, he's going to be there at the end of the fight. So if you're going to get plus 250 on a guy who fights like a junkyard dog and makes every fight close, then yeah, I think if you're going to a split decision, you want to be holding that ticket for sure.
Yeah. Or it could turn into one of those Elvis Brenner roll by spots where it's a trap. But yeah, I'll take Dalby. Moving on, we got Nasrat Haqparast sitting at minus 250 against Jared Flash Gordon sitting at plus 190. Jared Gordon, 7 years older than Kelvin Gastelum Jr. there. And he's got a 4-inch reach advantage, Nasrat does. These guys, both guys, solid on the feet, solid overall. It's probably a fight that plays out on the feet. Only real thing that I could see is Jared Gordon look for some takedowns. So it's a stand-up fight. Nasrat sitting at minus 250. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I like Haqparast a lot in this fight. It's just minus 250 against a guy like Gordon, who can sometimes make these fights into a dog fight. It is kind of scary to me, but ultimately, the age, Gordon's older here. Even against Mark Madsen in his last fight, he won by knockout or TKO, but he wasn't really winning that fight up until that point. I didn't think he was kind of getting pushed around a little bit, backed up against the cage, into the clinch, eating some shots. And the thing that I noticed was he just looked a tad slow, tad slower than normal. Like Jared Gordon's been in there with a lot of people. Bobby Green, he landed some decent shots in that fight in the first round before it was a headbutt knockout, no contest. Arguably beat Paddy Pimblett. And then he's fought some good guys, Joe Selecki he's beaten Leonardo Santos. He's been in there with a lot of decent fighters too. I just think he's almost quietly racked up like this long UFC career. Like I don't remember half of his fights. I really don't. But you look and there's just a ton of them. But he's definitely going to have the experience. Haqparast has been in there a lot too. These are two vets at this point. But the speed, the striking abilities, the technical striking is all going to go to Haqparast, in my opinion. If Jared Gordon wants to win this fight, he's got to get on the wrestling game and he's got to have success. And you can't get tired because Haqparast has good pace. He throws very, very good volume. He's always throwing something in your face. And he hasn't historically had the most power, but when he connects and when he can time his shots well, he'll knock people out like Jamie Malarkey. He's got the knockout win over Joaquim Silva. His hands are pretty good. And I think that's what it comes down to in this matchup. I just don't think Gordon's going to have the ability to keep up with him as far as the speed goes. I think to the judges, Haqparast is going to be racking up a ton of strikes. And yeah, I think he probably covers this minus 250. You just got to hope that Gordon doesn't make this a nasty dogfight towards the end. But I just, at his age and all the wear and tear he's got on all these UFC fights, I just don't see him doing that here against Haqparast.
Yeah, I don't really either. I love Jared Gordon. I see him at the gym all the time. Good guy. Got a great story. But I think this is a tough matchup for him. I mean, it's not like one that it's not winnable because he could definitely go out there, take the shots, give the shots back, and maybe land the more impactful shots. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep up with the volume from Nasrat, and I don't know that his chin is going to be better than Nasrat's because Gordon's been knocked out a few times. Nasrat, I think, has got the durability edge, probably the volume edge, and just the overall power edge. So if this fight plays out on the feet, I think Nasrat definitely gets his hand raised. And I think Jared Gordon, like you said, a little bit slower. He's slowing down a little bit. And honestly, you look at his wins in the last 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. It's like a 41-year-old Leonardo Santos and a 39-year-old Mark Madsen. I mean, really, anytime he fights somebody good, he'll lose. And then he fights guys that you don't really know, like a Chris Fishgold or a Danny Chavez or a Dan Murray. He'll beat them. But I think Nasrat is good enough to get his hand raised here. He'll be the pick for me.
Yep.
Moving on, we got Shara Magomedov sitting at minus 245. The Bullet is back in action. He's taking on the debuter, Joelton Lutterbach. I saw this on Twitter or on X earlier today. It said combat sports veteran, Joelton Lutterbach, because this guy has fights in like everything you could imagine. Karate combat, Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing, modified rules, MMA. Like he's got a long history in MMA. I mean, 38-10. And then he's got all these different fights with kickboxing, Muay Thai, etc. So he is the true combat sports veteran, making his UFC debut. The guy is actually pretty damn good. But the problem I see here is you see that on the screen. His last weight, 165.2. That's not an error. Like this guy fought in the PFL twice, and it was at lightweight. So he's been jumping around weight classes his entire career. Like he's fought at welterweight, lightweight, middleweight, catch weights, 165, 175. He's all across the board. So I don't know how he's really going to look like size-wise compared to Shara Magomedov. But it's probably going to make a difference if you've ever fought at 155 and then you're fighting at 185. That's a big, big jump. Shara Magomedov, 1-0 in the UFC now, still undefeated, and won the fight against Bruno Silva back in October, UFC Abu Dhabi, 30-27. Showed a lot of nasty, nasty kicks, some decent hands, and then terrible takedown defense, but still managed to win 30-27 because he was very active off of his back. This is a weird one, man, because we still don't really know a ton about Magomedov because he's had one fight. He looked good, but he didn't look like a guy that can't be beat. And then we don't really know a ton about Lutterbach as far as UFC level competition, as far as how he's going to look at 185 and what type of game plan he's going to bring in here, because he's got, 13 submissions on his record. So he has a ground game. He has some type of wrestling game, but he's also has a ton of experience kickboxing. So I don't know what this guy's going to do when he gets in the cage. Is he going to look to take him down? Is he going to look to strike with him? I have no idea. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. Because at the end of the day, like I think Lutterbach is probably the better fighter in general, like the better mixed martial artist. I think Magomedov is obviously a very sharp striker, holds some power. But you look at Lutterbach's career. He's in the PFL fighting Rausch Manfio. He fought Clay Collard both those guys to a split decision. And at the time, that's kind of the highest level in the PFL you could get. Clay Collard is in main events all the time still for that promotion. And he goes out there against he had a canceled bout with Igor Lima in grappling. But after that, it's all kickboxing, it's all Muay Thai, like you said, and it's all wins basically until he gets to Glory, I think, a kickboxing match. I mean, he racked up a lot of wins in striking events, which is impressive because you watch him fight. There's times when he's not like comfortable striking on the feet, and he'll go to the wrestling, and he's very good at it. He's a very strong guy for his size. Submissions on his record, a lot of decision wins on his record too, which just tells me, he has the ability to go out there and grind guys with the wrestling and put them against the cage, get them on the ground. And if he can do that against Magomedov, he's going to have a lot of success. And we saw Bruno Silva be able to do so, make that fight kind of dicey. And I don't think Bruno Silva, I don't really rate him highly as a wrestler or anything. So if Lutterbach comes in here and just competes on the feet, I think he's going to have advantages in the grappling and the wrestling too. He holds a lot of power in his hands. I mean, we've seen him get a lot of knockouts in his career. He's definitely, experienced in all aspects of fighting. So makes it very interesting. I think that minus 245, I think this price tag is probably a lot of money coming in on Shara Bullet because of the hype. It happens all the time in the UFC. We see these hype trains come into a fight. They're a massive favorite when they shouldn't be, and they either get into a very, very close fight or they lose, and the public is just hammering money on them because they've heard of the Pirate, Shara Bullet, and they've never heard of Lutterbach. But at the end of the day, this fight's probably pretty damn close, if I had to guess. If nobody gets knocked out in the first 2 to 3 minutes, this is going to be a close scrap. I'm going to take the dog. I'm going to take the dog. I liked what I saw in the striking with Magomedov and Bruno Silva. There's a lot of things in that fight I didn't like from Magomedov too. And I remember thinking like, okay, the first time he fights a good wrestler, I'm going to fade him because he gets taken down. He was kind of stuck on his back a lot of the time. And if it happens here against Lutterbach, it's not like Lutterbach doesn't have a lot of experience. This guy is one of the most experienced fighters on this whole entire card. So yeah, give me the dog here. I'm going to go against the grain.
If Lutterbach was a true middleweight, I'd be over it all. I'd be all over it.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
That's the biggest thing to me is like, you watch some of his fights, like he can get takedowns on these guys that are lightweights and welterweights, but I don't know. I mean, Magomedov really didn't have much of a takedown defense at all, so maybe he could take him down, but maybe he's just able to explode back to his feet and he's fine. This is a really tough one. I really struggled to take Magomedov at minus 245 when Lutterbach has a massive grappling upside. Ultimately, I kind of look at this fight probably looking to take the under or something because Magomedov's got big power on the feet and he's knocked out most of his opponents. And Lutterbach, if he does take the grappling approach, I think he could probably submit him on the ground because I don't think Magomedov has much of a ground game. So kind of more looking towards a violence type of bet here, some type of finish inside the distance. But for a pick, I will go with Magomedov because he's the bigger dude. I think he is a very, very nice striker. Like his striking is insane. He fights behind his kicks a lot, and his kicks looked really, really deadly in that Bruno Silva fight. And Bruno Silva just really couldn't touch him with much on the feet and had to resort to wrestling. So I think he should be able to keep his distance. He will be the pick, but at minus 245, I don't really like it. I'd love to see these guys when they're facing off on Friday just to see the size difference and how that looks. But Magomedov's the pick, and we can move on to the main card. Johnny Walker sitting at a pick'em against Volkan Oezdemir. Oezdemir, 34 years of age. Johnny Walker, 32. He will have a 4-inch height advantage and a 7-inch reach advantage. Johnny Walker coming off the knockout loss to Magomed Ankalaev, and Oezdemir in the knockout win over Anthony Smith's doppelganger
Submission.
Guskov. It was a club and sub type of submission. So yeah, his first one of his career, I believe. And that screwed you on that bet. Am I correct?
Would have been my biggest parlay hit of the year. It was like 47-1 or something.
Yeah, you needed the knockout, but he got the sub. So who could have predicted it?
The knockout was there, dude. It was just staring him in the eye, and he took the sub.
This is a good matchup, though. Light heavyweights. I'm sure we're going to see some hands being thrown. Who do you got?
Yeah, this is one I've already got a play on. I'm taking Johnny Walker, and I look at Volkan Oezdemir as a really good striker. And even against Bogdan Guskov, like he looked very, very sharp in that fight. He, completely won from the start of the bell till he got that finish later on in the first round. But Guskov is a guy that you can hit. He has the big power in his hands, but when he's not landing that, he's not really doing much. And Oezdemir, it was his debut for Guskov. Oezdemir comes in, cracks him, hurts him, and gets a sub very early. If that fight goes on, I think Guskov has a chance to, win or knock him out if, he doesn't get finished in the first round. I just don't really rate that fight. I hate debuters like that. A guy like Guskov who kind of gets tired, has the big shot power, and then Oezdemir, who's a very technical striker. He was just kind of, just a step ahead, a lot more experience in that fight. But against a guy like Johnny Walker, he's going to be at a massive reach disadvantage, probably a speed disadvantage. Johnny Walker's hard to deal with. He moves funny. He's very, very long, and he's got a dangerous game all around. If you want to get in with the wrestling, he can submit you. If you want to stand at range, he's hard to hit because he's so tall, he's so long, and Oezdemir is going to want this technical striking match, and I just don't think Johnny's really going to give it to him. And for Oezdemir, I look at his record too. Like, yeah, he beat Guskov, loses to Nikita Krylov. Paul Craig he beat by decision. Couldn't even finish Paul Craig. I mean, come on, man. Magomed Ankalaev he lost to. Yuri Prohaska by knockout. Like, he's fighting good guys, but honestly, Johnny Walker is too. His last loss, Magomed Ankalaev, beat Anthony Smith, beat Paul Craig by KO in the first round. Jan Kudatalaba, he's fought in the Jamal Hills. Like, these guys are pretty equal on an experience standpoint. I think Johnny Walker, though, when you look at this fight, Volkan maybe starting to slow down a tad from, not really in the Guskov fight, but before that, he just looked a step slower and stuff. And when you take a guy who's 6'6" and that much more athletic than you, that much younger, I just think that's going to be a recipe for him to start looking, pretty good as this fight goes on. Maybe finish Oezdemir, but if not, I just think he's going to land the bigger shots. He's going to be landing more often. I think it's going to be harder for Oezdemir to find the timing and find the range against the guy as big as Walker. So, yeah, I'm on Walker here at these odds. I mean, it's a pick 'em fight. Doesn't get much better than that. So, yeah, had to take it.
I'm on the opposite side.
Oh, no.
I'm going to give you a pretty good explanation as to why. Johnny Walker doesn't do anything well. All he is an explosive big athlete. And if we're talking MMA, Volkan Oezdemir has levels in skills much higher than Johnny Walker. And the most important thing I think in this fight is the fight IQ. The fight IQ on Oezdemir's side is a lot higher than Johnny Walker. Because you pointed out that Volkan Oezdemir couldn't finish Paul Craig. But I actually look at that as a positive because he didn't get submitted by Paul Craig. And he was on the ground with him for 5 minutes. And all he did was sit on top of him and not allow him to get any type of submissions. Not even a chance. All Paul Craig was just laying on his back. So I like his fight IQ a lot better. And his technical striking is levels above Johnny Walker. Because as I said, he's just an explosive athlete. That's all he is. He has no type of setups to his games. All he does is throw leg kicks out there. And when he does throw his hands, he leaves so many openings that Volkan Oezdemir can exploit in this matchup. And I think he probably knocks him out. You look at Oezdemir, his last 2 losses, he's only losing because he's getting out-wrestled. Johnny Walker doesn't shoot takedowns. He's not going to shoot takedowns here. And if he does, Oezdemir historically has an 80% takedown defense. So Oezdemir is getting taken down by Krylov, who's actually an insane wrestler. Very good wrestler. Took him down 7 times. Ankalaev out-wrestled him in that fight. And then before that, got knocked out by Yuri Prohaska. Yuri Prohaska has like 27 knockouts. So I'm not going to really say that Oezdemir has a bad chin, but I will say that Johnny Walker has a bad chin because he leaves it way up in the sky. He gets knocked out in the meanest ways. He's a fun guy. He's a fan favorite, which I think a lot of people are going to bet on Johnny Walker just because of that. And then if you're kind of a casual fan, you probably don't even know who Oezdemir is. Oezdemir is a high-level kickboxer who finds openings, and he's going to find them on Johnny Walker. So I think Oezdemir is the side here. Overall, statistics-wise, too, Johnny Walker, 44% striking defense. Oezdemir, 55%. Yeah, the reach might play a little bit of a factor, but Johnny Walker does not set up anything. He doesn't use his reach. He just tries to explode on you and land something big. And when he's sitting at range, he just looks in the mirror. He might throw a leg kick here and there, but Oezdemir is a kickboxer at his base. He's not going to be taking bad leg kicks and getting debilitated like Anthony Smith. I was watching the Anthony Smith fight with Johnny Walker. Anthony Smith was tagging up Johnny Walker in the first round, finding all these openings. And Oezdemir, if he hits you, he's got a lot more power in his hands than Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith hasn't knocked down anybody since like 2010 because he's got nothing left in those hands. So I think Oezdemir is the side. And I think Johnny Walker is going to be a really public play this week. So that's my breakdown. Did I sway you at all?
Nah, not really. No, I mean, not that you didn't sway me. I see your points, and I do think definitely the fight IQ thing is going to be a big deal in this fight. I think Oezdemir does have a good fight IQ, but outside of hurting Bogdan Guskov, he hasn't landed a knockdown in the UFC or a knockout since August 10th of 2019. 5 years, and I know he's fighting really good fighters.
He doesn't fight that. So, I mean, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 fights ago was his last KO. And in the meantime, I'll give it to him. He's been fighting, Ankalaev, Yuri Prohaska, guys like that. I just think at some point he takes a little bit step back. He's been in a lot of these fights. I just haven't looked. He hasn't looked like an absolute world beater on the feet. Not that you have to beat Johnny Walker. Yeah. I just think it's going to be it's kind of going to be like a chess match because Walker is going to be hard to figure out at first because of his weird movements and stuff, where Oezdemir probably wants a guy that's just going to.
You're going to take Johnny Walker in a chess match.
No, I'm saying it's going to be the first one to not a chess match to where who's going to not the fight's going to play out like a chess match, but early in the fight, what I'm saying is it's going to be hard to figure out how each one of them is going to implement their game plan because Oezdemir, I think he will struggle with the movements early because Walker he does get into like a more settled down pace like he did against Anthony Smith in the second and third round where he's just kind of trading leg kicks and standing in front of you. But early on, I just think Walker could win the first round, maybe even the second, and he just doesn't have to get knocked out, and I think he can win the fight. Oezdemir just hasn't blown me away, really. He had a good performance against Guskov, but Guskov was getting his ass beat by Ryan Spann until he found the big KO. If Guskov doesn't find KOs in fights, he's not winning many UFC fights. So I just haven't rated many of his performances or wins very highly for a long time. So yeah, I don't know. It should be an interesting one
on Saturday when he knocks out Johnny Walker.
We'll have to put a little side bet on it. I know we've had dinner bets every time we go to Vegas.
Yeah,
and I think I don't know. I think you're undefeated on me so far.
What was the other one? I'm trying to think back to
was it Benil and Charles?
Yeah, it was Benil.
And what was the first one?
I think that was the only one.
Maybe it was,
but I think
it got canceled or something.
Yeah, it probably got canceled. But yeah, at least one of us will win. We'll get it either way. But I got here, you got Walker. It'll be fun. Moving on, we got Mohamed Naimov. There's no odds out on this because it got announced earlier today, taking on Felipe Lima. Lima sitting at 26 years of age, taking on the 29-year-old Mohamed Naimov. Now, Lima's taking this fight on, 5 days notice now? Because he just took it today. So he's filling in for Melsik Bagdasaryan. Bagdasaryan is a kickboxer. And based on the tape that I watched, Felipe Lima, more of a wrestler. He trains with Hamza Chimaev at All Stars Training Center in Sweden. And he's a guy that's been on that regional scene for a little bit here. I mean, he just picked up a win in Octagon to get the Bantamweight Championship. So he is a true Bantamweight. He's going to be taking this fight at featherweight because it's short notice. But he's a guy that hasn't lost since his UFC debut. So he's on a 12-fight win streak. Looks like a pretty damn good wrestler. But so is Mohamed Naimov. Naimov is one of these guys that's like, doesn't really look that skilled, but he just wins fights. Like he's on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC. And I can't really knock him, man. Like he knocked out Jamie Malarkey in his debut.
He's a big underdog too.
Yeah, big underdog. Doesn't really age the best, but won against Nathaniel Wood as an underdog. And then last time out against Eric Silva. Eric Silva blows out his leg in like 40 seconds, and he picks up a TKO win in the first round. He was a massive favorite there. I'm assuming he'll be the favorite here. Yeah. What do you think this line's going to be? I kind of see this as like Naimov minus 200. I don't think he's going to be that big of a favorite, but because I think Lima's actually pretty decent based on the film that I watched, and he's tough, and he pushes a pretty hard pace. But he is going up in weight, so I think Naimov's probably going to be like a minus 200 favorite, at least to open, maybe settles around 250 or something like that. But interesting fight. What do you got?
Yeah, if he is minus 200, I think it's a parlay piece for the week because, Lima going up in weight and then on short notice mixed in with his style, which is going to be a wrestling heavy approach. I just think if you don't have a full training camp and you're going up against a guy like Naimov who can play that same game, like the guy's extremely strong for the division. We've seen him take down, the Nathaniel Woods. He holds his own against any type of wrestler. I think it's a tough fight for Lima. I do think, though, this is a tougher fight for Naimov than a guy like Melsik Bagdasaryan is, because if Naimov just takes Melsik down, I think he has an easy path to victory there. Bagdasaryan's a great kickboxer, great striking. Naimov can hang with him on the feet, or hang with a lot of people on the feet until he can get his entries to get the fights to the ground. So stylistically, I think Lima's a tougher matchup. But making your debut against a guy like Naimov, who's pretty proven, I would say, in the UFC at this point, knocks out Malarkey in his debut, beats Nathaniel Wood, who is a pretty highly rated fighter in that division. I do think it's going to be tough to come in here on this short of notice and fight a higher paced guy like Naimov when you're used to try to fight at that pace too. I think if anybody wears down, it's going to be Lima. I think Naimov is going to be the stronger, more physically strong fighter. And on the feet, I haven't really seen a ton out of Lima on the feet that's to be desired. but we do know Naimov can crack, and we do know he can take a punch. It just everything kind of points to Naimov here. Maybe full camp, and we see Lima get a few, lower level UFC fights under his belt, so we can really see what he's got. Maybe it's a different story, but here in this stage right now, I think this is Naimov's fight.
Yeah, I'm tempted to take Lima because I watch his tape. I think the guy's gonna actually be pretty decent because he pushes an insane pace. Like that fight he had in Octagon earlier this year, I think it was. Just 5 rounds of pure go, 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 like chain wrestling. He'd get taken down, he'd reverse, get a takedown. They'd be back up to the feet, he'd be throwing a flying knee. Like he's a guy that pushes a really hard pace, and I think Naimov does tend to fade the later the fights go. Like against Nathaniel Wood kind of put it on him in the 3rd round. So if he can come in here with that type of gas tank and go that way, maybe he has a chance. His striking really isn't all that dangerous. Like he doesn't have a ton of knockouts with his hands. His hands really aren't that crazy. He does love to throw like that flying knee or knee with an entry. Talking about Lima here. And then for Naimov, I just don't know how to rate this guy. Like, especially as a favorite. Because when he's a dog, like I know this guy's tough and he's strong in a lot of positions and he can hit hard. So that's why I kind of like him as a dog. But we've seen this guy lose to Colin Anglin. We've seen him lose to Olivier Marad.
And it feels like we're just kind of waiting for him to lose in the UFC.
Yeah, I'm
watch
waiting
him, and he doesn't.
Spot. I'm waiting for the spot where he's just going to go in there and lay a deuce. And maybe it's this time, but I do think the physicality aspect and him just being bigger and stronger is probably going to save him here. So I'm going to take Naimov for the pick. But if this line is anything crazy like minus 400, then I might have to sprinkle on the dog here. But yeah, Naimov's the pick.
Lima's been fight like Octagon's not a bad promotion. It's if you're fighting on the regional scene and you're fighting in Octagon, you're going to get some decent competition in there. He actually had a fight scheduled with Xiao Long, who's on this card that we talked about in the first fight of the night. I wish that fight would have happened because I think that would have told us a ton more about both of their fights on this card. But if you watch Lima's tape, I think he's like a wrestling style that a lot of people in the MMA fans hate that wrestling style, but he makes it fun. Like he's explosive, crazy, relentless pace. So yeah, I don't know if his gas tank's really good and he's been in shape and training, then maybe he takes Naimov to deep waters. We'll see.
Another one I want to look at face-offs to see the size difference, but
yeah.
Move on. We got Kelvin Gastelum sitting at minus 250 against Daniel Rodriguez sitting at plus 190. Rodriguez, 37 years of age, back-to-back losses to Ian Gary and Neil Magny, and arguably should have lost against Li Jingliang. So possibly a 3-fight losing streak for him. But Kelvin Gastelum on the other side, not really picking up a ton of wins either. Guy really taking a lot of L's over the years. Last time out, lost to Sean Brady, and then picked up a win against Chris Curtis before that. He's moved down to welterweight now. Seems like that move should have happened years ago, but it is here. Lost the first time against Sean Brady. Completely different matchup here against Daniel Rodriguez. Probably one that they'll stand and slug it out. Who do you got?
Yeah, dude, I feel like this is the fight between two guys that are some of the most untrustworthy in the UFC. Like you just never know what you're going to get with Kelvin Gastelum. We've seen him in fights like against Israel Adesanya for the title, where he looked very, very good, tough, durable, hurt Izzy, and made it a really close fight. And then we see him in other fights where he just looks absolutely awful, and then comes back against Chris Curtis and just almost outclasses him on the feet, was faster, landed the more power shots, and then goes out against Sean Brady and just gets completely dominated on the mat. He also seems like a guy, too, that there's times he's motivated and training and he's ready for a fight, and there's other times that his cardio, everything, his physical form, nothing looks like he's been preparing for a fight at all. So it's hard to see or hard to tell, I guess, which version of Kelvin Gastelum we're going to get, because if he's focused, comes in and shows up, yeah, he should definitely beat Daniel Rodriguez. But if he doesn't, and D-Rod is a little bit motivated after that Ian Gary loss, D-Rod's been in there with a lot of great fighters. He's, Li Jingliang, he's got a split decision win over. Mike Perry, he's got a win over. He's fought, your run of the mill guys. He's just been in there with a lot of different looks. So if Kelvin Gastelum wants to play the game on the feet and strike with him this whole fight, I mean, it could be a close one in my opinion. I think D-Rod obviously going to have the reach advantage. He's a little bit taller guy. He doesn't have the most power in the world, but he throws a lot of volume. I mean, he's always throwing something.
Mhm.
And if he can do that against Kelvin, and Kelvin's not in shape and hadn't been taking it serious, I could see him like running away with the second half of the fight here. So definitely not confident. I'm going to take a shot on the dog here. I just don't think Kelvin is really fighting for much anymore. I think he just kind of likes competing maybe a little bit. He likes the paychecks, but I mean, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, and he's 2-6 maybe in his last 8 fights, fighting all the best guys and everything. But I just can't remember a time outside of the Ian Heinisch fight, Chris Curtis, and the Izzy loss where he's really looked like he's been motivated to do this anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to take Kelvin Gastelum for a pick, but it's not really with much confidence. I do think he'll come into this one highly motivated, but stylistically, I think this is probably a pretty close fight because I don't think Gastelum's going to be shooting a bunch of takedowns. And it's a fight that plays out on the feet. I'd give the durability edge to Kelvin Gastelum just because the guy's always had a granite chin, and Daniel Rodriguez just got knocked out. But that was a head kick from Ian Gary, not any type of hand work. Not really see Kelvin Gastelum throwing these big head kicks. So it's a boxing match when it comes down to it, honestly. And I think Daniel Rodriguez probably has more volume. Maybe Gastelum hits a little bit harder, or at least sits down on his punches a little bit more. And then he's got some type of grappling edge, some type of durability edge. So I think it's a close one, but I'm going to lean Gastelum for a pick. And, Daniel's, he's getting older and doesn't quite have the zap or the punch or snap on his punches anymore. He's just kind of throwing a ton of volume out there. And I think Gastelum will be able to hit him a little bit harder. So
Yeah.
I'll take him, but it's really not a confident one.
D-Rod throws so much. It's insane.
Yeah, he does.
7.3 per minute on a long UFC career. I don't know. He's fought a lot of guys and a lot of strikers too. But for Gastelum, like the one red flag that just makes me think like this guy doesn't really give a shit anymore is he gets dominated by Sean Brady. And after the fight, right when he gets submitted, he's kind of like smiling and laughing and giggling. Like, I want to see you pissed off that you just got your ass whooped and embarrassed like that in front of everybody. As the favorite too, I think like slight favorite maybe in that matchup. I want to see you pissed off and upset about it, not happy, like looking like you're just happy to be there. So I don't know. I just don't think he's in it anymore. He's had a good, I don't know about good career lately, but he's had a long career and he's fought, like I said, nothing but the best guys for a long time. Tyron Woodley, Neil Magny's, Tim Kennedy, Chris Weidman, Michael Bisping, Jacare Souza, Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson. I mean, this dude's fought nothing but killers. So hats off to him. That's a lot of damage to be taken against those guys. That's a lot of injuries in between, a lot of miles on the old car in Kevin Gastelum. So we'll see what happens.
I think it's just gonna be funny to see Daniel Rodriguez walk out with all those tattoos in Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised they let him on this card.
Face tats. He's got like the lipstick on his cheek tattoo. It's funny.
Since they're on the same card, I want a picture with Kelvin Gastelum and Nasrat Haqparast because those like they look like brothers,
Same
twins.
It's the same dude. Completely different ethnicity though.
He's gonna throw like one of those like t-shirts on that makes you look like you're a little heavier. Like Nasrat's gonna fight, throw that t-shirt on, come out, and now he's Kelvin Gastelum. So,
all right, let's move on to the co-main event. Sergey Pavlovich back in action since getting knocked out against Tom Aspinall in the interim heavyweight title bout. He sits at minus 245 against Alexander Volkov, who sits at plus 186. Volkov 35 now. Pavlovich 32. For some reason, I thought Pavlovich was only like 30, but he's 32.
Dude, they kind of look like brothers too.
Yeah, they kind of do too. I guess that's because Pavlovich took like 3 years off or something, like 2 years off, and then he came back and he's just been an absolute monster, knocking dudes out in round one. I mean, this dude, if there's one guy that I want it on my side for like a street fight, just for the pure factor of looking scary, it's Sergey Pavlovich, man. The guy just freaking huge. He has abs at 260, bro. Like, guy's insane. And maybe I'm glazing him a little bit too hard because he did just get knocked out his last time out. But Volkov been around forever, and he's crazy because he's been super durable throughout his career. Like, he's only been knocked out in his entire career twice. and he's got 47 fights at heavyweight. That's crazy. So if he can, weather that early storm from Pavlovich, then he's got a real chance to pull this one off. But not many people have been able to weather the storm from Pavlovich. So that's really what it comes down to. What do you got?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one because when I look at Alexander Volkov and you look at his record, the guy's racked up a ton of wins and he's beaten some really good guys. Fabricio Verdum back in, 7, 8 years ago. Stefan Struve, he's beaten the Walt Harris, Overeems. Like he's fought a lot of high level competition. And compared to a Pavlovich, I mean, he's definitely got the experience edge. Pavlovich has fought in guys in the UFC who never really panned out. I mean, we got Maurice Green. It fought Derek Lewis when Derek Lewis was in a big slump. Tai Tuivasa kind of got found out for not being the most skilled heavyweight in the world. But the one fight that really impressed me for Pavlovich was Curtis Blades, because he went out there and completely dominated him on the feet, had Curtis Blades having no idea how to find an entry to a takedown, and then knocks him out. And Curtis Blades is a guy who's about to fight Tom Aspinall for an interim title. And Tom Aspinall, I think, is the best heavyweight right now on the planet outside John Jones. And Aspinall did beat Pavlovich, but, again, Tom Aspinall's best heavyweight on the planet outside John Jones. So it's not really a bad loss by any means. Including John Jones. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think so too. I just think, until John loses, I just can't formally say that. Words can't come out of my mouth. But I do think Volkov is going to struggle here at the end of the day. Volkov's a guy, if the fight goes on late, I think he's going to have a great chance. But early, I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to land some big shots. I think he's very strong. If he wants to put him up against the cage and kind of work from there, I think he's going to have the ability to. I've seen all these stories online that they trained together, and Volkov even said himself he's never even won a round against this guy, didn't want to fight this guy. Those are red flags to me, because once they get in the octagon and it's really go time, I think Pavlovich kind of has that psycho in him where he can, just go out there to scrap. And I think that's what happens here. I think Volkov might be a little hesitant to get into those exchanges. He's going to have to use the front kicks and the teep kicks a lot, because if this thing gets in close, he's going to be in severe danger of getting knocked out, in my opinion. So I'm going to take Pavlovich for the pick.
Yeah, this is such a weird one, because the factor of that they've trained together before is so weird. Like, how many times have we seen where fighters have trained with each other before and they kind of know who's going to win the fight already? Like, they already know who's been winning in the gym before. And it sounds like it's been Sergey Pavlovich that's the one that's winning. But I also have heard many stories of how Pavlovich can't even like spar with guys because he hits too hard and he'll just give guys brain damage. So I don't know, man. Like, this is a weird one because Volkov's been so durable throughout his career. Like, Derek Lewis is the only guy to knock him out in the UFC.
The last second.
And it was, literally 11 seconds left. And it was a massive right hand. And then that didn't even knock him out. Like, he was on the ground and still to take, massive ground and pound shots from Derek Lewis. So, if Volkov can weather the storm, then of course, you got to favor him later. But also, you can't really count Sergey Pavlovich's like cardio out because we haven't really seen it. So maybe he does have, an ability to go 3 rounds and not look, death gassed. He has 3 decision wins. And as we're sitting here, I'm actually kind of thinking, like, what would a Pavlovich by decision bet pay? Because, if he can't knock out Volkov, Volkov's just that durable. Maybe he doesn't even want to hurt Volkov because they're, training partners or something like that. So maybe he just wins a decision. But another thing that stood out to me is, like, Tom Aspinall, when he fought Volkov, he was hitting him with some good shots, like landed 29 significant strikes, and then was like, okay, I can't really get this guy out. I got to take him down and submit him that way. So Volkov might have just that chin that can just take it, man. Like, Pavlovich hits like a truck, and he's just got some crazy pace to him where he just walks you down, and he's actually super fast as well with his hands and explosive. I'm going to lean Pavlovich for a pick, but at minus 245, I don't know that I could pay it just because Volkov could be that durable. And, it's heavyweights. Volkov has power in his hands as well. And we just saw Pavlovich get knocked out. So how do we know if he's going to recover from that with ease. He might not be able to recover from that. So I'll take Pavlovich for a pick, but it's very sketchy to me.
Well, I mean, the last thing too is it's not like it's the first time we've seen Pavlovich knocked out. He lost in his debut to Alistair Overeem. And the other thing is that nobody's really talking about is that if Volkov can survive the first round, we have never seen Pavlovich pass the first round ever. Like everything is round one finish or he gets knocked in the UFC. Yeah, at this level. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights. Nothing past round one.
He went 5 rounds in Fight Nights Global 2017. Won a decision.
Who was it against?
Mikhail Matskin, who's currently 15-6-2.
Wow.
Not terrible. Fought in the PFL, lost twice. But yeah, very, very. I'm excited for this one. I always love to see Pavlovich fights because you never really know what's going to happen. But
right, if Volkov can get those kicks, those teep kicks going, and just slow him down and get to the second round, I think it's you could almost live bet Volkov because you can probably expect him to get his ass kicked in round one. But if he survives it and Pavlovich goes for the finish in the first, I think you hammer Volkov, honestly.
Yeah, I see that too, but I also kind of see the books playing in the factor that like Pavlovich probably going to gas or something like that, so they won't give you
probably won't get a massive number,
big number, type of thing. But
yeah.
Let's move on.
Fun one.
To the main event. We got Robert Whittaker sitting at -146, taking on Aliskerov, sitting at +114. Aliskerov was supposed to fight last week against Antonio Tricoli. Didn't really need that fight. It was more just to stay active, and he gets the call here against Whittaker. Whittaker, of course, was supposed to take on Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev pulls out with the illness. Whittaker says, anyone, anywhere, anytime. And he takes on the unranked Aliskerov, who has 2 fights in the UFC. Massive, massive spot for him to get a win over the number 3 ranked Robert Whittaker. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a big fight for Aliskerov. He's doing the UFC a massive favor here. And honestly, if he beats Robert Whittaker, he's probably in the mix and he's an injury away or something crazy happening from getting the next title shot just because of Dana White loves this shit where he's supposed to be fighting a Tricoli as a -1200 favorite, a guy that has never even sniffed the UFC level of fight. He's supposed to run through him, and they take him out of that fight to give him Robert Whittaker 7 days later. Short notice. Now you're flying back home. He was in the US cutting weight for a fight. Now they're saying, okay, you're flying back to Saudi Arabia. You're going to fight Robert Whittaker, who's one of the best middleweights of all time in the UFC, and you're going to do it on 7 days notice. Now, if he can go in there after cutting weight the first time, getting the fight canceled, cutting it again, and beat a guy like Bobby Knuckles, yeah, I think the UFC is going to show him a lot of respect and put him, in that kind of top 3 to 4 mix. And if anybody falls out, maybe next for a title shot, get some new blood circulating in there. Tough fight for him, though, in my opinion. Like Aliskerov in the UFC has fought Phil Hawes, who has no chin at all, and he completely, flatlines the dude with a 1-2, and he beats Warley Alves, who is older, who takes damage, and is not very fast on the feet. And Aliskerov landed a massive knee up the middle and just put him out. So now you're going from that to training for Tricoli. Now you're fighting Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker, if he doesn't get knocked out in this fight in the first round and a half, I think he could style on Aliskerov, kind of like he does everybody. Once, he gets his flow going, once you start getting a little tired, he's very good at starting to rip the body. His boxing is super clean, some of the best at middleweight. And if you want to try to go out there and wrestle Robert Whittaker, good luck. You're probably going to gas yourself out. So very tough fight for Ikram. It seems like a very good story, though. Like he's fighting, in Saudi Arabia, his part of the world, against one of the top guys in the UFC. So for the pick, I'm going to take Whittaker. I think this is just a little bit too much for Aliskerov. I mean, I know his only loss is Khamzat. It's by knockout. It's kind of poetic that he's fighting in Khamzat's place, but this is like one of the biggest steps up in competition you can get from scheduled to fight Tricoli to Robert Whittaker. So yeah, I think it might be a little too much.
Yeah, this is like, obviously there's no way that Ikram's going to have anywhere near the experience nor like the resume of Whittaker. So that's an obvious thing. So then you look at like the betting odds. I'm like, why is Whittaker -146? Like, why isn't he -400? Because obviously doesn't have the experience, doesn't have any type of resume to even to sniff Robert Whittaker. So this is, a big tell to me that like Ikram has all the potential in the world, and the books are kind of respecting that. And you do have to look at the potential, look at the skills, because the resume doesn't make the betting odds. So I look at Ikram's skills, and I kind of look at like where am I going to give him the advantage, and I would give him the advantage in the power because I think he does have some pretty
Yeah.
solid power on the feet. And Whittaker hasn't knocked out anybody since 2017. It's been over 7 years since he knocked anybody out in the UFC. Very high level fights, but at the same time, he's just not knocking anybody out. I don't even think he has one knockdown or two knockdowns, I guess, against Till and Cannonier, but he just doesn't really hurt people that much anymore. So I think Aliskerov has the power advantage. I think he's got the durability advantage as well because Whittaker, he's a little bit chinny. Like he's been chinny throughout his career. I mean, he's been knocked out 3 times. And he's been knocked down by Duplessis, Adesanya, twice in the first fight, Romero twice in the fight that he won. So I do think there's questions on Whittaker's chin. The cardio advantage, you probably have to give to Whittaker. He's always got good cardio. And then the ground advantage, I'm going to give Aliskerov the ground advantage because I don't think Whittaker is a great offensive wrestler. We saw him get taken down by Duplessis with like the most stupidest trip that I've ever seen. And I think Aliskerov has a really good ground game. You watch him get guys to the ground. Watch that fight on the Contender Series. He picked that dude up, double leg, put him on his back, and then got a Kimura in like 20 seconds, less than 20 seconds of him being on the ground. So I think he's got a good submission game as well. And as I'm stacking these up, I'm just giving more edges to Aliskerov. So I'm really questioning like how this line is the way it is. And it almost seems like Whittaker at minus 146 is just too good to be true.
Yeah, they're kind of baiting you to take it.
Yeah, it seems kind of like bait. And the more that I look at the skill level, then I kind of look at like, okay, Aliskerov is probably the side as the underdog here to me. So I'm going to take Ikram Aliskerov as the pick. And if you don't like that, you could maybe take him by first or second round finish because I think that's probably the way he gets it done. He just goes in there and takes it over in the first 2 rounds. But you could always live bet it later with Whittaker. But yeah, I think Ikram probably goes in there and seizes the moment and takes him out. Very weird fight though. Very weird.
A part of me too thinks, I picked Whittaker. I think he's probably, skill for skill. Whittaker can hang with anybody. But yeah, the chin's a big issue. And now that you do say that about the odds and everything, it almost seems like the UFC is not, wanting a fighter to win here, but they benefit a lot from Aliskerov winning against Robert Whittaker. You kind of start to build a new star, a guy that can compete in this high level of mixed martial arts, and you throw him in there against guys like Duplessis, Sean Strickland's and stuff. You just add another big name contender, a guy that's fun to watch too, a guy who's finishing all his fights. So I have a feeling the UFC is going to be crossing their fingers. Maybe he does knock out Robert Whittaker, and then you can kind of start branding this dude into a big star in the UFC.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds crazy because the resumes just don't match up at all. But like stylistically, like styles make fights. And in this style, I think Aliskerov has the tools to beat Whittaker. So as the underdog, I'll take him. Like Whittaker has some great skills, but if he's going up against a guy that's also really well-rounded and has real finishing abilities, then that's a tough fight for him.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I'm taking Aliskerov. I mean, it's going to sound nuts, but it is the way. It's the way that I'm thinking. So we'll see. Well, we will see. But that's the breakdown for UFC Saudi Arabia. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your picks down in the comments below. Stay up to date with everything at Home of Picks on the IG, and you can join the Home of Fight Picks premium membership. The link is down in the description. That's where you'll get every single one of our bets every single week. At HI Picks on the medias. For me, where can I find you?
All social media is at the Parlay MMA.
Till next time, the double leg, signing out.